I was an oil painter, and after graduating, my husband and I were married, and several years later we had our first child, and I could no longer paint with oils because of the toxic fumes. So I happened to have some fabric paints handy because my mother-in-law had sent me some fabric paint with a little baby's baseball hat, and I'm sure her intention was for me to paint something cute on the baseball hat, which I hate to say I never did, but I took that fabric paint and put it on a small little canvas that I had and created a rooster. And the rooster came out to be probably an inch off of the canvas because I kept building the paints on top of itself, and the technique just really intrigued me because I love sculpture so much that my paintings became sculptural. After I've spread all the paint on the canvas with my fingers, then with my fingers I'll draw out whatever it is that I'm going to paint, and then I'll take the fabric paint and squirt it in a linear fashion around whatever it is, and then I'll fill in. And once it's all filled in, it takes me days upon weeks sometimes to layer it over and over and over again until I get that three-dimensional look. I was a barefoot country girl, and I would pick wildflowers for my mom on the way home from school. Our driveway was about a mile long, and my mom said I would meander. I would not get home right away. I would stay on that driveway picking flowers, and it would take me a very long time to finally get through the door to present them to her. A lot of my creative inspiration comes from my dad. One of my first memories with him being outdoors was when we lived on a little walnut tree farm in a farming community in Wisconsin. And we would take these long walks. We'd be gone for over an hour, and my mom would be home cooking and cleaning, and we would just, we had no purpose behind it. We would just walk. And we'd go, over hills, I remember, and he had these long strides, and I'd be trying to keep up with him. I was probably in kindergarten or first grade. And he'd always notice things. He'd stop and say, "Look at that. Do you see that on the branch over there?" And I'd get a little closer, and it'd be like a really neat insect, or he'd show me the differences between trees, and he'd point out wildflowers, and then he also would do something that he still does to this day. He'd say, "Imagine this spot. Can you imagine if we built a cabin here? Wouldn't it be beautiful?" And then he'd show me where everything would be placed, and the view that we would have. And he's just a visionary. My mom is another person that I believe I got my creativity from. She is very good at drawing. However, she doesn't draw anymore. But when I was a little girl, I remember her designing clothes on paper while she was talking on the phone. She'd draw beautiful women and flowing gowns, and her handwriting is just incredible. And I would copy her. I'd take that little piece of paper that she was writing on after she was done talking on the phone or visiting with a friend, and I'd take it to my room and I would just practice it, and I'd do what she did over and over and over again. And I believe that my talent for drawing faces and people come from my mom. And my mom also is very good at decorating her home and building a flower garden, and a lot of the love for gardening comes from my mom as well as my dad. The Driftwood kind of found me. I was on a date with my husband. We went up to Wisconsin Point, and I had found a beautiful root of driftwood. It almost looked like cedar, and it was waterlogged. And he's a big football player, big muscles, and I said, "Could you please take that to the van? I would love to take it home and put it in our garden." And so he did, and he was lugging it through the woods for about 20 minutes, and I was bored all by myself on the beach. So I sat in the sand, and I was looking around at the little pieces of driftwood around me, and there was a moose's snout, and it had the snout, and then it had the little eye on top. And I thought, wouldn't it be fun if I could find all the pieces to make a moose by the time he got back? And so I scavenged around until I found everything I needed, and I placed it all together in the sand. And when he got back, I said, look what I made. And he recognized it was a moose and said, we need to bring that home and show the kids. And once I brought it home, I put it all together and I put it in my gallery, and the people that saw it said, are you making more? Are you going to sell them? And I hadn't thought of that. And so the kids and I went to Wisconsin Point and we gathered a bunch of driftwood and brought it back to the studio. And some of the pieces are so incredible because, you know, it'll look like a duck's head, and then I just have to assemble the rest. It's like putting a puzzle together. I'll find eyes and ears, and all I need is one inspirational piece, and then I dig in my supply of driftwood until I find the rest of the body. And it's been really fun. I enjoy sculpture so much, and it's been a very good outlet for me.